Good evening, one and all. We welcome you to the International Webinar Series on Holistic Health, Well-being and Sustainable Development 2022 on occasion of World Environment Day and month 2022, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute and Center for Arts, Sciences and Well-being. Before we start our session, let's take blessing from the Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
The blessings of Almighty shall continue to today's session. Today we have with us David S. Prescott, mental health practitioner from USA. He is a mental health practitioner with 38 years in the field. David Prescott is the director of Safer Society Continuing Education Center, as well as an independent consultant and evaluator, also an author and editor of 25 book projects in the areas of understanding and improving services at risk clients. He is best known for his work in the areas of understanding, assessing and treating sexual violence and trauma. Mr. Prescott is a recipient of 2014 Distinguished Contribution Award from Associations for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers and the 2018 recipient of the National Adolescent Perpetration Network's C. Henry Kempe Lifetime Achievement Award, and also the 2022 recipient of Faye Home Knopp Award from the New York State Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Violence and the NYS ATSA. Mr. Prescott regularly lectures and provides training around the world. His published works have been translated into multiple languages. We welcome you, Mr. David S. Prescott, for accepting our invitation and joining us. And we request you to take over for your session on the Good Lives Model, a framework for treating harmful behaviors. Over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it was just wonderful to be invited. And so thank you for the very kind introduction. And I will be speaking for approximately 1 hour, I guess, and I am very interested in whatever questions you might have along the way. So please do feel free to put questions into the chat. So, okay, so with that, I am going to start sharing my screen, and here we go. So let me just ask, and you don't have to answer, but I will just ask. Have you ever done something that you really wish you didn't do? Have you ever done something that you really regret? Well, in the old days in the US, in perhaps 30 years ago and beyond, we would have said the best way to address behavior problems or things that you've regretted are to make a little list of every way that you're not going to do that again in the future. And we would come up with a plan for how you were going to avoid doing bad things. We would talk about all of the ways that you would prevent getting yourself into trouble. And all too often, what we've forgotten and what we've overlooked in all of this is that very often our problem behaviors, the things that we regret the most, very often were attempts to achieve or meet the same kinds of goals that all human beings have. And so all human beings, for example, whether you're in the US or you're in India or someplace else, everybody wants to be connected to other human beings. Everybody wants to know how we fit into the world around us. Everybody wants to be good at something, and everybody wants to have the right to make their own decisions. And so many times, the most harmful behaviors that people can perpetrate, the most harmful behaviors that people engage in, are actually misguided attempts, or in America we would call them maladaptive attempts to meet some of these underlying goals. I will talk more about that as we go along, but that is the sum and substance of the Good Lives model, which I'm going to talk about. So you've actually already heard this. I'm David Prescott. I'm the director of the Continuing Education Center at the Safer Society Foundation. I invite you to go to our website and to see what we have to offer. We produce trainings and free webinars, and all of it is in the direction of trying to eliminate social and sexual violence. I realize that that's a big job, but Safer Society has been around for 40 years trying to do it. So safersociety.org. And we also publish a magazine, and we do other kinds of things along those lines. By the way, another one of our projects that we try to do is to provide mentors, teachers, adults who can help provide guidance to children whose parents are in prison. And so here in my state of Vermont, in the northeastern US, roughly half of all people who are in prison have children back home. And so we try to help those children do what they can to have a better life. Okay, so I always like to say a great big welcome. It's wonderful to be invited to be at your conference. And likewise, I would like to welcome you to the kind of work that I do. I started almost 40 years ago working with children and adolescents who had caused harm to others. Over time, I started working with adults who had also caused harm to others. And the primary place where I found myself being asked to work was trying to prevent sexual reoffense by people who had sexually abused others. Sometimes these were violent crimes committed against adults, and sometimes they were crimes committed against children. And I must say that as a result of doing this work and of working with individuals who have abused to try to build a better life, it has benefited me. I've actually become a better father and a better husband and a better man as a result of doing this work. And so I often encourage others to get involved, because We never know how many people we end up saving from victimization by working with the people that we know have abused others. Okay, so let me get right into the Good Lives model then, starting with its foundation. And I might just talk a little bit about treatment. And I do hear some voices, so I might just mute everybody. There we go. Okay. I guess I tried to mute people, but I couldn't do it. But hopefully you can hear me. And that's very odd. Okay. So when we look at treatment outcomes across the board, whether we're talking about violent men, just physically violent men, or if we are talking about sexual abuse, as we try to understand how effective our treatments are, the water becomes very murky. We're trying to stare and find answers. It's like trying to see the bottom of the lake through murky waters here in this picture. And so there's been a lot of work in this area, starting with an article back around 2013. And what the authors concluded here was that there was very little research showing. And I'm going to ask the hosts if there's a way to turn off the microphones in the background. I'm just hearing background noise. Thank you. What these authors concluded was that the research up to that point was finding that there wasn't that much conclusive evidence that treatment actually worked. And of course, we wanted to be better than this. And then over time, there was a meta-analysis, a study of studies that found for people convicted of sex crimes, some of the most horrific crimes, that we found that men who did not go through treatment tended to reoffend at a rate of 13.7%, whereas after treatment, that was reduced down to 10%. So if you just look at the numbers, it looks like an absolute reduction of 3%. But in fact, another way to look at this is in relative terms, that is that's about a 25% or 26% reduction in crimes as a result of treatment. That tells me that this can be very important work for us to do. And yes, here we go. I was asked with a friend of mine to please write a comment on that article, on that first article. And with my friend Jill Levinson and I, we said maybe our treatment programs will be more effective if we keep in mind that our clients, these individuals who have abused others, are more similar to other therapy clients, like in regular psychotherapy, than they are different. Treatment is not something that we do to our clients. Treatment is a collaborative process, and it's a collaborative process of building better lives. So with that, lots of research around the world in Canada and Australia, New Zealand, and the United States has pointed to three basic principles of how to work with individuals who have broken the law. And these big three principles, I think, will make a lot of sense, but they take a long time to be able to master. The first of these is the risk principle. And what this means is people who have higher levels of risk also need to have higher levels of intervention. So more risk, more treatment. And the need principle says that we need to target what we call dynamic or changeable risk factors that people present with. I'll show you some of those risk factors in a moment. And then finally, we need to make sure that our clients can respond to the kinds of treatments that are available to them. This is called responsivity, and it's probably the biggest word that I will say today. It's not a common word in the English language, but responsivity basically means how well can somebody respond to the treatment that they are getting. So more treatment for higher risk people, making sure that we're addressing exactly what needs to be addressed, and then doing so in a way that the client can respond to. Okay, so as I promised, these are the kinds of risk factors that treatment programs should be targeting when it comes to working with individuals who've harmed others. Hostility towards women, which I think we know is a big problem all around the world. In some cases, it's when people emotionally identify with children. This is for people who sexually abuse. When they feel that they can only get along with children, they may cause harm to children. There's also the negative social influences. If a person's only friends are other people who get in trouble with the law, it's more likely that they will break the law. Likewise, if they have just no positive relationships in their lives at all, that is another risk factor for engaging in harmful behavior. Intimacy deficits basically means that the person is not able to form close relationships with others. And then there's also cases of poor sexual self-regulation. This would be when people turn to sexual behaviors in order to keep themselves calm or feeling happy, it might be the only way they know how to experience pleasure. It's not difficult to see how all of these would get somebody into trouble. And then there's other sort of general self-regulation difficulties, meaning this person is impulsive, they can't cope with the stresses of daily lives, etc. And in some cases, there are some people who simply are interested or prefer to engage in behaviors that are abuse related. This is just part of a personality style for them. So before I talk more about the Good Lives model, you can see right here, this is a list of very, very difficult and challenging features that somebody may come to us with. This is, I think, putting these all together. Somebody would have to be in treatment for quite a long time to be able to come to terms with these. And the average person who's put into a treatment program who doesn't want to be there, who's been perhaps arrested for a crime or has been detected for committing a crime, none of this looks like a very pleasant thing to work on in therapy. And so many of us said, if we're going to change these behaviors, we have to work with our clients very, very carefully in order to make sure that making changes to their lives is something that they want to do. How do we build somebody's internal motivation to make changes? Okay, well, then we go forward from there. And many of us came to the conclusion many years ago that ultimately our clients in treatment want better lives, not just the promise of less harmful ones. You may go into treatment because you have harmed others, but the goal of treatment has to be something that we can approach, not something that we can avoid, like I was saying before. In the old days, treatment was about what would you avoid. With the Good Lives model, we said, what can you get out of treatment so that you can have the best life that you can under your current circumstances? So that is what makes the Good Lives model different. And I think also helps to explain why it is so popular around the world. So I think all of us want better lives tomorrow than we have today, and not simply the promise of ones that aren't quite as bad. Okay, so I'll perhaps spend another moment on this, and I'll explain when it comes to treatment. Here's an example of what I'm talking about, which is when I was a teenager here in the USA, I started smoking cigarettes. And I loved the taste of the tobacco. And more importantly, I thought all of my friends seemed to smoke cigarettes. So I should smoke cigarettes too. So I smoked them, and I smoked them in front of adults. And I used to say, oh, look how cool I am. This is great that I'm smoking cigarettes. Well, it wasn't very long before I decided that I wanted to stop. And I had always heard that quitting smoking is one of the most difficult things that you can do. So my goal was to stop smoking cigarettes. But the problem at first was all I could think about when my goal was to stop smoking cigarettes, all I could think about was smoking cigarettes. I kept saying, I don't want to smoke. I can't smoke. I have to not smoke. I have to not pay attention to my friends when they're smoking. It was miserable. It was really, really hard to do. So I went back to smoking. Now, all of this did not last very long. But eventually I changed my goal. And I said, it's not about quitting smoking. All I want is to be a healthy person. I just want to have my health back. And I want nothing to influence my health in a bad way. And so when I was working towards the goal of better health, I actually found quitting smoking to be a lot easier than I would have. So human beings are more motivated by what we can approach, what we can achieve, what we can attain, and what we can acquire. We're more motivated by those things than we are by things we're trying to avoid or never do again. And that's, I think, the most important point that I can make today. So the Good Lives Model, and this is taken from a book that I wrote 12 years ago now with a woman named Pamela Yates and a man named Tony Ward. Tony Ward really is the founder of the Good Lives Model. He lives in New Zealand. He's a really nice guy, but he is the creator of the Good Lives Model. And I just want to be clear about that. The Good Lives Model has two goals. And the first is helping people to manage risks. And the other is to attain a fulfilling life and psychological well-being. And so when I quit smoking cigarettes, I was looking for a fulfilling life and psychological well-being. I wanted to feel strong enough that I could go out and run a marathon. And once I had my sights set on physical health, all of a sudden, it was easier to reduce and manage my risk to smoke because I had lots of risk factors for smoking in my life. I had a father who used to smoke. I had a history of smoking. I had friends who smoked. So I had risks that I needed to manage, but it was much more fun when I had bigger goals in my life. Psychological well-being. Okay. The Good Lives Model is also intended to be collaborative and strengths-based. It builds on what is right with a human being, not what's wrong with a human being. And it elicits and builds on internal motivation to make changes. It's not just about you need to be a less dangerous person. Instead, it's about what's in it for you. What kinds of things do you want to do with your life that will make you a happier and more content and fulfilled person? Okay. The Good Lives model itself, many of us have noted that it goes very well with motivational interviewing, the principles of risk and need and responsivity, as I just mentioned, cognitive behavioral approaches. And I'm not going to talk much about the last two things that you see here because there's not enough time. But there is something called a self-regulation model, which examines the pathways by which somebody goes on to commit harmful behaviors. And then the Good Lives model also benefits from a solid understanding of what kinds of strengths and other factors in somebody's life is going to protect them from future offending. So ultimately, the Good Lives model finds that crimes reflect the use of inappropriate means, harmful behaviors, to pursue otherwise legitimate goals, or what we call primary human goods. Primary human goods. And a primary human good is an action, an experience, a circumstance, a state of being, etc., that individuals seek to attain for their own sake. For example, as I said earlier, everyone wants to be good at something. Now, I'm sorry for the English lesson here, but I am speaking English. There's some, here in the US, there's some language differences. So I'm going to come back to this idea of primary human goods and change some of the language. I apologize if that's a little bit confusing. But in this model, there are things called secondary goods. And these are the means for securing the primary human goods. They're also called instrumental goods. So a secondary good is, what do we do in order to get the goals that we want out of life? So for example, myself, I really like to have a state of peace of mind. Peace of mind. Okay, and there's a few different ways, some different means by which I can get peace of mind. One of them is I can meditate. Another one is I can walk. I love to go out walking. And another one is I listen to very soothing music. In fact, I actually have a nice collection of Indian classical music that I like very much. All of these things make me feel at peace. However, if I spend all of my money on Indian classical music, well, I'm going to get myself into trouble because I won't have money for other kinds of things. If all I ever do is walk, I won't be able to do my job because I'll be too tired. And if all I ever do is meditate, I won't be able to get other things done in my life. But these are different things that we can do that give us the things that we want out of life. So I like to meditate. But what is upstream from meditation is peace of mind. I do it because I want I want peace of mind. Now, not every human being wants to meditate. I suspect most people don't like meditation, but all human beings want peace of mind, that sense of inner peace. All human beings want it in one way or another. It comes in different forms, and those are the secondary goods. So in this way, this might be a bit complicated, but when we think about these risk factors, things like impulsivity, only having friends who are criminals, these can be internal or external obstacles that prevent us from getting what we want out of life in pro-social ways. And these things can actually create risk. Here in the US, I really emphasize to others that it's important to think about these risk factors like impulsivity or poor coping skills as processes. These are stories that play out across somebody's lifespan. The problem isn't that an individual is impulsive. The problem is that their impulsivity over time has gotten in the way of their getting what they want out of life. Okay. So of these primary human goods, we believe there's 10 to 11 of them, and that all human beings are seeking these things for their own sake. Okay. Oh, by the way, I prefer to think of it as 10, but there was one study that found 11. I can explain later if you're interested. And yes, how important these various human goods are to somebody contributes to how they lead their life and helps to determine what we call a good life plan. And we all have a good life plan, whether we know it or not. These primary goods can contribute to abuse and other harmful behaviors, either by their presence or their absence. And when we can help people to attain these goods in adaptive ways, we can help or reduce or manage their risk to reoffend. So this led to some arguments. And again, this is an English language problem. Is a primary human good the same thing as a goal? And so in order to make this model easier, my colleague Pamela Yates and I recast the language. But what you see on the left are the 10 primary human goods. And what you see on the right of your screen are the common life goals. These are life goals that everyone has in common. So we all want to live and to survive. We all want to live and survive. We all want to learn things and know things. We all want to learn and to know. We all want to be good, either at our jobs or at some other place in our life. We all want to have some kind of mastery experiences. We all want to have some personal choice and independence. We all want to have some peace of mind. We all want to have relationships and friendships. We all want to be part of a group or part of a community. And we all want to have meaning in our lives. We all want to have some happiness and pleasure and fun through our lives. And we all want to have new experiences or experiences of creativity. I think it's safe to say everybody in the world wants everything that you see on the right, but we all want it in different forms. So I'll give you an example. Here in the US, we're kind of famous for our independent spirit. So we have fought wars over independence, and particularly in the western part of the country, we have the American cowboys that go out and live on the land by themselves, and nobody tells them what to do. Americans are all about personal choice and independence. We also want our relationships and friendships too, but we have a reputation for personal choice and independence with a kind of cowboy mentality. Okay. Now my friend from Mexico, just south of the US, from Mexico says, you know, David, here it's the complete opposite. Our families are everything. We are a collectivistic culture. And so I don't know if the Good Lives model fits with me. And my response to this is always, it just sounds like you place a higher priority in your culture on relationships and friendships. And that in fact, your family gives you a great deal of your sense of meaning in life. But everybody who is in a family, and I have a family too, everybody who's in a family, every now and then wants their own ability to make their own decisions. Even if it's something as small as going out to a restaurant and choosing what you want from a menu. We all want to have some personal choice and independence somewhere. So we all live in different cultures and different places and different families, but underlying everything else, we all ultimately have the same goals. So when I get somebody into treatment, I want to think about each of these goals. And I want to ask, with this goal, what will progress in this area look like to the client? And what will it look like to other people? And what can the client do to make positive changes to get this goal without hurting anybody? And what kinds of problems or challenges might happen as the client tries to improve? How would the client know when things aren't working? How would the other people around the client know when things aren't working? What can the client and others do when things start to go wrong? What kind of plan can they have in place for when things aren't working so well? And then finally, how can the client and others acknowledge progress in these areas when it happens? Okay. From there, then, I'm also very interested. How have traumatic and otherwise adverse or just bad experiences affected this person's ability to get this goal? The reason I say this is because I did 2 studies with my friends Jill Levinson and Gwenda Willis from the US and from New Zealand. And we found that people who commit crimes, especially people who commit sex crimes, very often have had all kinds of awful things happen to them in their backgrounds. I think one of the most important things we could possibly do is to try to eliminate childhood trauma. If we eliminated childhood trauma, we would have far less mental illness in the world than we do today. If we eliminated childhood trauma, our prisons would be nearly empty. And so I'm very interested to know, how have bad experiences affected this person's ability to achieve their goals? How have the same experiences affected how he looks at the world? Where are all the places that this person may experience ambivalence about this goal? How do they feel 2 ways about things? I'll give you an example. Many of my clients say they don't want to have fun. I say, but you can't go through life without having some fun experiences. I don't know what kinds of experiences are fun to you, but sometimes I like to eat a bowl of ice cream myself. And that can be kind of fun. But they say, well, I want to have fun on the one hand, but I'm ambivalent because on the other hand, having fun is part of what got me into all this trouble of hurting other people too. I committed a lot of crimes while having fun. So they feel 2 ways about this. And then the question becomes, how can we elicit, how can we discuss the client's internal motivations about attaining this goal without harming others? So I may have great ideas, but the client always has better ideas than I do. Okay, so with that, let's go a little bit deeper. I've put here a picture. It's a classic picture of a young man, and it looks like he is committing a crime. I've chosen this picture carefully because of America having so many tremendous problems with racism right now. And so many kids have ended up in trouble simply for wearing a hooded sweatshirt. By the way, this is not a real picture. That is some kind of model or actor. Okay. And the job of the therapist working with the Good Lives model is to be able to look at this picture and say, upstream from this awful presentation right here, can we see this kid trying to be competent? We all want to be good at something. But maybe this kid only sees violence as the only thing that he can be good at. Maybe it's that violence is the only time he gets to make his own decisions because he lives in a world that basically controls him and looks down on him because of the color of his skin. Can we see that maybe the only way he has to make connections with others, with relationships and friendships, is with other kids who get themselves into trouble, as you see in the background in this picture. And maybe violence is the closest thing he's ever known to being happy or having any kind of pleasure. So the one thing I can guarantee as I look at this picture is his mother did not raise him to be this way. So somewhere in there is a kid that knows that this is not a good way to have a life. On the one hand, I want to have a good life. And on the other hand, this might be the only life I can have given my circumstances. Then we ask, what's the difference between where this kid is and where he wants to be? Here I am, I'm in a street gang, and where I want to be is a better life that I can't even imagine. Okay, so that's just, perhaps one example of this. Here's another example. We look at this guy. He's not very attractive, and he has the words thug life tattooed across his belly, as well as the image of a machine gun or an assault rifle tattooed across his belly. He seems to be smoking a cigarette. His pants aren't on correctly. Basically, he looks like he's in pretty tough shape. And he has, that's a poster of Tupac behind him. Tupac was a criminal as well as a rap artist, and he died a violent death. And so as I look at this young man, it's easy to become horrified by his presentation. But I keep thinking that maybe being a thug is the only thing that he believes he's good at, the only place where he's competent. That perhaps being a thug is the only place where he feels he can be independent, that he can have a sense of independence. And it may be that his only friends are also thuggish. And so he says, being a thug is the only way I can have connections with other people. It might be that he derives meaning and purpose from being a thug. He says, this is the only way I know where I can fit into the world around me, is I am a thug. This is how I define myself. And the only way I know to have happiness and pleasure is to be a thug. Can we then look at this young man and see the ambivalence? On the one hand, I'm having fun. And on the other hand, I know I'm not going to live a very long life because of my physical health and my criminal behavior. Is there a difference between where this man is and where he wants to be in his life? I would say the difference is this big. We just need to talk to him long enough to be able to identify that difference. So for this reason, I say we should always meet our clients where they dream. When I was a social worker in school, I always heard we need to meet our clients where they're at. A friend of mine, and I just want to say his name, Stephen Andrew, because I think he's such a wonderful person. He says, we need to do better than meeting our clients where they're at in their lives. We need to meet our clients where they dream. We need to think in terms of what is it that they really want in their lives? What's missing from our client's life that they wish were there? What kinds of things are they longing for in their life? Who are they longing for in their lives? If we can reawaken those kinds of dreams, we can probably go further than if we say, you need to stop doing such harmful things to others. So I say, always meet your clients where they dream. Okay, so let's go a little bit wider with all of this. And so here we have three teenage kids. They are spray painting a concrete wall. It looks to me as if they're in a park. I believe the young man is drinking a beer and that he's too young to be drinking that beer. So the question then becomes, what are these kids doing? They're committing crimes. And you see that the other girl is leaning up against him. They do not look entirely sober to me. So what's going on here? Well, if I were their parent, if I were their dad, I would be telling them to come home. So what I think may be happening here is that they have a push towards autonomy. They're just trying to do anything they can to show off that they're autonomous and independent and making their own choices. I also think that they're enjoying their time spent with each other. They're connecting. For teenagers, relationships and friendships are so important. I also think they're enjoying having new experiences. After all, they haven't been old enough to be out on their own for very long. And finally, I think they're enjoying some competence. They're saying, okay, committing crimes is something we're good at. Nobody's going to catch us as we spray paint a concrete wall in a public park somewhere. Okay, then we have this kid. He's obviously taking drugs. And so this is, he's finding some way to get happiness and pleasure here. He shouldn't be doing it. You see, there's a couple of other kids behind him. Maybe he's at a party or something like this, but he's definitely taking illegal drugs. So and when we think about finding the strength that's upstream from this, it can be pretty difficult to do. So what I'm seeing is he has a push towards autonomy. He wants to do what he wants to do. All human beings want to be autonomous in one way or another. But we know that if he keeps taking drugs, he's not going to, he may be independent, but he's not going to live very long. And so here he is trying to be an autonomous individual. I also see him as this is something that he's doing with his friends. So he probably thinks it's a way that he can fit in with his peer group. This is part of his relationships and friendships, and that he's also engaging in some kind of creativity. And I mean, in the sense of novelty seeking. He's doing something new, again, because he hasn't been a teenager for very long, only a couple of years, it looks like. And so he's trying out new things. He probably won't keep doing that the rest of his life, but we'll see. And of course, he's seeking happiness and pleasure. Now, how many of us have ever tried to be happy? How many of us have ever tried to do new things? How many of us are deeply connected to other people? And how many of us are independent and autonomous human beings? So it's not hard to see how we're all connected to one another. There's a saying in the US and in Canada amongst Indigenous people that a criminal is somebody who behaves as if they have no family. And I think that this is a very wise statement, that when people start to behave only in their own self-interest, forgetting that they're part of a community and that they have people at home who love them, that starts the criminal process all too often of behaving badly. Okay, here's a young man. He's looking through, I don't know, perhaps it's a cage. He looks like he might be locked up. He's locked inside somewhere and he wants to get out. So when I see him wanting to be free. I see him wanting to be connected to the people who he cares about and who he misses. I see him wanting to have his life back. And there's a big difference between where he is and where he wants to be. Likewise, you see these kids, they're out looking like they're going to get into trouble. They have their faces painted, or maybe those are masks that they're wearing. The girl in front is giving us an obscene gesture. Anyway, so again, if they were my children, I would be calling them home. Kids need us adults to set limits on them. But boy, don't they look like they're having fun? The problem is they're having fun in all the wrong ways. They look like they're about to commit crimes. What is going on upstream from this presentation here? Well, again, I'm seeing it's just adolescents trying to be independent. They're being connected to each other. They have friendships that are important to them. They're enjoying their lives. They're thinking about how they're going to survive into the future. And oh boy, are they trying to have happiness and pleasure. And so even though they look like they're going to commit crimes, there's a lot to appreciate with these kids. Okay, then we have this fellow here. I don't think that that's tobacco that he's smoking. He looks like he's taking drugs, and he does not look like a very happy young man, in my opinion. And he's wearing a paper plate up on his head, so he looks like he's what we say playing the fool here, but not a happy individual. Well, in fact, that picture makes me very sad to look at, I just have to say. Here, I think we may be looking at some autonomy, his own push towards independence. I'm not sure how or why. It's not a very good way to be out on his own. He may think that by taking drugs and by being foolish, that this is the best way he has to make friends. It may be that he just wants to have a life, and wherever he was before, he wasn't having a life. He looks like he may well have been abused. It looks as though smoking and being goofy is the only way that he can experience happiness and pleasure. What is the difference, do you think, between where that kid is at and where he wants to be in his life? If he keeps smoking whatever it is that he's smoking, and if he keeps acting foolish, he's not going to get where he truly wants to be. Now, he might tell you in a clinical session, oh, I'm fine. I don't need your help. I'm doing exactly what I want with my life, taking drugs and committing crimes. But if you keep working with him, sooner or later, you will start to hear the evidence that there's something bigger that he wants in his life. So once again, I keep thinking, I'm picking up themes of trauma and other adverse experiences. There have been things that have blocked these kids from getting what they want out of life. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this a little bit, and you can think about your answers to these questions as we go through this. So when you think about being good at something, okay, being competent, how important is being good at something to you? How important on a scale of 0 to 10? Okay, and on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you that you could get better at whatever it is you want to get better at? How confident are you? Okay, so most people score very high on importance and not quite as high on confidence. Now, ask this question. Ask yourself, on the same, why did you pick that number on confidence? Why did you say you were a 7 and not a 4? How come you didn't score yourself much lower than you did? And whatever your answer is to that question is going to speak to your strengths. It's going to speak to your internal motivation. You might say, well, I didn't score lower because I already am good at something, or I really want to be better at this thing, or I have reasons to improve my competence, or I really need to improve my competence. By asking why a problem isn't worse, very often we end up talking directly to internal motivation to change. And then you could ask, what would it take for you to score just a little bit higher on your confidence? What would it take for you to score just a bit higher? What would it take to move you from 7 up to 8? And you can ask the same questions with autonomy and independence. How important is it to you to be independent in your life, 0 to 10? And on the same measure, confidence. How confident are you that you can be more independent and autonomous tomorrow than you are today? 0 to 10. Okay. So why did you pick an 8 instead of a 3? Wow, you must have some desire to be independent. You must have some ability to be independent, some reason to be independent, some need to be independent. Yeah, so we can play with each of these good life model goals in this kind of way to explore what's meaningful, what's relevant, what do they want? And again, what's missing from their lives that they wish were there? What do they really want to do as they move forward with their lives? How about connections to others? Yeah, and can I just point out for a second, connections to others is so different from autonomy and independence. We all want some autonomy and we all want to be connected to others. And sometimes those two things don't go so well together. Whenever, I'll just say, I've been married for 28 years. Whenever I'm away from my wife, I really miss my wife. And yet, whenever I'm at work and I'm away, whenever I'm with my wife, I keep thinking about the work that I need to do and the things that I need to be able to take care of independently. For me, all of life is a balance of these things. So how important is it to you to have good connections with other people in your lives? And how confident are you that you can have those better relationships that you may be looking for? How confident are you that you can do it? And why did you pick that number and not a 0? Tell me about any confidence that you might have. Oh, you have a history of some good relationships. You've learned a lot about your relationships. You've learned a lot about what not to do in your relationships. So you've learned a lot. Did you ever think that you would be able to do that? And maybe you could even say, let's talk about getting better, and let's talk about having you stand. Over there is 0, and over here is 10. Go stand on the number where you think you might belong, and then ask yourself, look over your shoulder and ask yourself, did you ever think you would be this far ahead in things to begin with? Did you ever think you would come this far from 0? So there's lots of different ways that we can play with these things. Everybody wants to have meaning and purpose in life. Everybody wants happiness and pleasure in life, and everybody wants to live and to survive. Everybody wants to have new experiences or to be creative. And yeah, so as you answered those questions just now, let me ask, what external pressures did you feel? Do you answer these questions on behalf of your clients? Do we tell them what they need to think? Do we tell them what their goals should be? Because I would say only we may be the experts on providing treatment, but only they are the experts on their own lives. Or do we explore, collaborate, or evoke what is important and meaningful to them? So Within this way of working, we see 4 basic ways that people get into trouble and where their plans fall short. And the first one is when they're using problematic means to get what they want out of their lives. In other words, what they're doing just isn't working. The next one is when they have only a very narrow scope to their good life plan. They're only focused on 1 or 2 things in their life, like the person who goes out and works to make lots of money and then realizes that they've alienated other people along the way. The third one is when there's some kind of conflict between goals, when your drive to independence interferes, for example, with your relationships and friendships, or when your desire to have new experiences alienates the people that you are close to. And then the last one is when you have a lack of capacity to achieve what it is that you want. Sometimes some people, for example, me, no matter how hard I try, I will never be an effective rocket scientist. I'm just not good at rocket science. I am good at practicing mental health. And so, as far as I know, that brings us right up to exactly 1 hour. And so I just wanted to say thank you for your time and to invite any questions that you might have. You could just put them into the chat. Other than that, I just want to say it really is an honor to be here with you. I've never been to India. I certainly hope to someday. And I've been to many other places in the world, but not there. So with that, I'll just say, are there any questions or comments, concerns, anything?
It was wonderful.
Huh.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful presentation, David.
Thank you,
The way
Doctor.
you presented is really wonderful. The flow you have taken and really address various issues, and and this topic itself is very sensitive in matter to understand.
Yes, it is.
So the way you presented and taken it, really, you have done a great job. And yeah, this
Thank you.
is need of the hour, because we see a lot of crimes related to sex. I mean, sexual abuse is happening, and also a lot of sex-related violence, gender violence, and abuse, even at workplaces, even at schools, colleges, everywhere, because of the trends that are happening even on social media. They are also negatively influencing a lot of factors. So I think it's a really need of the hour, and you have been working on these topics since 4 decades. That's really a great job you people are doing, and
Thank you.
really a great work. And we wish you all the success, and definitely we would love to collaborate with you to bring on more awareness, more such programs in India, and also international platforms.
Absolutely. Thank you. I did see one question, and it was addressed only to me, which is chemical spraying on vegetables a reason to increase harmful behavior in a person? And I have to say, I'm not an expert in this, but I am very concerned personally about what we spray onto our food and what kinds of things we do with our food. I believe that there has been some link between, for example, too much sugar and impulsive behavior in children as well as adults. But with that, I just wanted to answer that. Thank you all for attending, and I will take my leave and wish you all the very best, and I hope to hear from you again. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
David.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
joining us.
Thank you very much, sir, for coming. And
Thank
it was
you.
a very informative and very wonderful session. Lot of learning, more than asking question. Lot of learning. It's new term for me, sir. So I did
Thank
lot
you.
of learning. Hope to see you more and more again in our sessions. All the best, sir. God bless
Yes,
you.
all the best. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, bye, sir.
Thank you, friends, for joining us. So feedback form is being shared in the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback form. And this Sunday, we have a international conference. This Sunday, we are having an international conference on medical health, allied health sciences, awareness, education, entrepreneurship, environment, and sustainable development. And we are commemorating on that day National Doctors Day, which is being celebrated on 1st July. But as we know that on that day, all the doctors would be busy, and I mean, that is a day for every one of us. So to celebrate, so we are commemorating it on Sunday, that is on 3rd July. And 3rd July also marks International Day of Cooperatives. So with the theme Cooperatives Build a Better World, and the National Doctors Day with the theme Family Doctors on the Front Line. So we are inviting presentations, participation, and also collaborations for this conference. Kindly do share this information with everyone. Whoever would like to have their presentations, feel free to register and inform us in advance. You can find the registration links in the Facebook group and also in the Telegram channel. So do share. Also kindly fill the feedback form before you leave the group. Thank you. Take care. Good night.